So the newest servant on JP is finally released. Her name, I'm hoping that I'm saying this correctly, is Biscione, and say it with me now, she is a single target quick servant, which is really unfortunate because that means half of the community is just going to see her immediately and say, oh, quick servant, completely unplayable, can't roll for this servant, even though I think quick servants do their best work as single target servants. But the other half of the community is going to see her being a single target quick servant, look over at, I don't know, the most recent buff that a particular assassin got, and maybe look a couple months back at a alter ego that also got buffed and say, well, why would I ever use the new single target quick servant when I have the old ones over here that are probably just better than her? And I'm not even one to say that you're completely wrong for thinking that, because looking at her kit, she is a very, very strong servant. I was like, this servant is very, very strong. But again, if you already have somebody like Kama or Melt, or you went really hard for the new Dantes last year, I don't know why you would summon for this servant, especially because, again, as a Lancer, she's kind of pigeonholed into only fighting against archers and berserkers. Maybe if you go for like NP 2 or 3, you could bring her type neutral into certain fights. But it really is an issue of the older servants with their buffs are kind of just better than this one, despite the fact that she has a really strong kit. But we're going to break it down in today's video, go over all the things that she's doing, because I do not think she's bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's just really unfortunate because you're always going to get compared to all of the older servants that come out and receive their buffs, and we just got a really bonkers Kama buff a couple of days ago. As per usual, if you enjoy being informed on both things that are going on both the NA and JP side of things, make sure you leave a like on the video, and more importantly, subscribe to the channel, as it's absolutely free and helps me out more than you know, and I upload these videos every single day. Also, if you would like to yap with other people about FGO, we have that Discord down in the description down below, so make sure you peep that out if you have further questions about this servant, or I guess just anything about the little old Spider-Man that's coming out over on the NA side of things and you're stressed out about how you're going to beat him. We got people in there that can definitely help you out. That being said, let's start diving into her kit, starting off with her hits. And I'm not gonna lie, her hits are looking pretty good. She's rocking 2 on the Buster, 4 on the Arts, 4 on the Quick, and 5 on the Extra, which we love to see, because if you're not in the know, the Extra attack is a composite card that gen stars NP and does big boy damage. And 5 is the golden standard that we like to see around here on the ZTL channel. But what we also like to see is a quick servant rocking the double quick and the double buster setup, because you may be saying, well, for a quick servant, don't you want to maximize on those quick cards? Not necessarily, because with Caster and Ruler Scotty being in the game, one offering you 100% crit damage on your quick cards and the other offering you 100% crit damage on your buster cards, having 4 of your 5 cards that are going to be slotted out with 100% crit damage is really, really strong. So when you're built in that way, you're maximizing the viability with both of your quick supports, because outside of them, you really don't have very many options. And with about 0.7% NP gain, those quick cards are going to be able to refund a decent bit of NP back with them being 4 hits. Her Arts card is also particularly powerful when you can get some crits going on that as well. And so it slots her out to be in a very, very good position just from a hits perspective. We always like to see something like that, because while your supports can kind of help you get by if your hits aren't super good, I mean, you can use somebody like, say, Maid Alter or Lancer Skyhawk that don't have the best NP gain on their, natural cards because they're a little awkwardly built. You could still get by with your Scotty and Ruler Scotty, but if you don't need as much help, you're in a far better position starting out. Now, there's not really anything notable on our passive skills. Normally, we would kind of go into those, but it's just a little bit of crit damage, a little bit of extra buster damage, and a slight bit of damage cut, which is kind of nice, but nothing super notable that you really need to be concerned about. So let's just start diving into our main skills, starting off with skill 1. Now, this would normally be one of those skills where I would say, poison, what are we doing? Damage over time against people? What is this, relevant? But she actually takes advantage of this. So this is more one of those skills that you want to just kind of bookmark, just keep it in the back of your head, because it will be important when we get to her NP. But what it is doing is it's giving her a 30% increased effect at being able to land negative debuffs on the opponent. So it's giving you like a 30% bonus chance to land that poison that she has on this first skill, and spoiler alert, poison on her second skill. She also gets increased damage over time effectiveness on that poison buff for 100%, or the toxic buff if you like the shorter term for it, while also lowering their healing rate received by 50% for 5 turns and giving herself 50% crit damage for 3 turns on a 6-turn cooldown. Realistically, the only notable thing that you're probably going to be using most of the time is, all right, skill 1 is 50% crit damage, the same amount of crit damage that someone like Waver is able to give you. It's going to allow her to be doing some nice mean crits. But if you know you're going to be going into the NP, it's always really strong to go ahead and pop this skill. If you're going to be using this servant in some 90 plus or 90 plus plus nodes as a single target farming type servant, it's always good to save this for the absolute last wave. That way you can get an extra poison stack on the enemies, and you can also get your crit damage up in case you have to use face cards. If you're going into challenge quests, you could pretty much pop this immediately to start getting those poison stacks going, because you really want to pair this with her second skill, which we're immediately going to move into, because this is where I think her whole kit kind of ties together. It seems to be centralized around this skill, because she's getting 30% on her quick cards, 30% on her buster cards, which again, we already talked about that before. Very strong with ruler and caster Scotty, because they like you to be doing really big crit damage on your quick and buster cards. But then she kind of functions a little bit like maybe the Dio Scurry twins, if you want to think of her that way, because she has on attack buffs that proc on her quick and her buster cards. Anytime you use her quick card, she's going to poison the enemy, which again, not a whole lot of poison, but is very important for her NP that you start developing these poison stacks as fast as possible. And then on her buster cards, whenever she uses those, she's going to give herself 5 stars, which again, very strong for being able to generate stars, because her own star generate isn't exactly the highest. I mean, go figure, she is a Lancer. She's not going to be dropping stars all over the place, unless of course you're doing stuff like quick change, which can kind of help mitigate that, giving you the additional 20% crit chance as well as bombing 20 stars. But having those extra stars in rotation whenever you decide to go for your buster cards means that you're always probably going to remain topped up, although it might not be a bad idea to also have stuff like, say, a 20-30 in the mix somewhere on one of your Scotties or ruler Scotties. But this is essentially the skill that makes the servant, because it's giving you your card buff so you can do really good damage on your NP with the quick crits, and then that additional buster damage so your buster crits will actually do a decent bit of damage, and most importantly, setting up the poison stacks. Now, one of the things that I do want to note out for this servant is that those command codes that you might be sitting on that, you know, are like, oh, whenever you attack with this command card, you know, poison the enemy. Those might be really good to give to a servant like this, because she is really going to want you to have a massive amount of poison stacks on the enemy, which we'll talk about when we come to her damage. And so if you're able to potentially, you know, double poison somebody because you not only have the second skill up, but you also had, say, a poison command code on that quick card, that can really help you get going from like, I don't know, maybe only developing 2 or 3 poison stacks on, you know, with the skill 2 and skill 1 to maybe doing like 5 or 6. You know, being able to get more of those as fast as possible is really going to help a servant like this out. But again, we'll talk about that in a second when we get to her NP. Her final skill though, her third skill, is just in general going to be very strong. It's 2 hits of invincibility that last for 3 turns. It's going to give her a 30% battery, and then 20% NP gain for 3 turns on a 6-turn cooldown. Again, just a lot of nice bonus stuff that they give her. The 30% battery pairs very nicely if she needs to be your single target servant in, say, a 90 plus or plus plus node, or if you're going into a boss fight, it's just going to be access to immediate battery. A little bit awkward that they didn't give her the 50% battery, because again, the way that Scotty and Ruler Scotty kind of work is that they give you 50% batteries. So if you don't really want to waste this, you might have to go into a pen skill, because between the 3 Scotties, you have 150% NP with all their batteries, and then with this, you only have 180%. So if you're trying to guarantee fire these NPs back to back to back, you probably are going to have to invest in something like that, or maybe like a starting charge CE or something along those lines. But again, 30% battery is still good. A battery is a battery. The survivability, I think, is also really strong, because if you're using her with Ruler Scotty doesn't really keep you alive. She can lower the enemy's charge on her own NP, but because you're predominantly going to be doing quick chains, and quick single target servants are really selfish, you always want to be going for their cards over your DPSs. It's not like Arts where you're just doing arch chains all over the place. You're rarely going to find Ruler Scotty's NP. Same thing for Caster Scotty. Caster Scotty has a really strong NP that even offers you a little bit of survivability, but you're probably not going to get into it very often, as I'm sure a lot of people that have ever tinkered around with quick setups have found. So having your own survivability, not relying on the like once every 5 turns Scotty NP on a good day, is very, very solid. And the NP gain is just a little bit there to kind of help her out a little bit. It makes her refund on her quick crits and her arts crits just a little bit better, just to kind of help her out there at the very end. But let's talk about this NP, because again, I think most of what she's doing is centralized around the second skill, setting up the NP over here. So the NP has 5 hits on it, not the craziest, the hits do matter if you're talking about dropping stars or if you're talking about NP refund on overkill, stuff along those lines. But what it does is it hits the enemy with a 5-turn poison. So again, we're kind of stacking additional poison buffs, gives them the toxic buff or more damage over time effectiveness for those poison buffs. She sucks a charge out of the enemy, which again is kind of nice. That's that Ruler Scotty effect, but better on your offensive servant because you should be spamming this ability, effectively mitigating how many NPs the enemy is going to fire at you. But then you see it right there. Deals additional damage or a power mod of 100% plus an additional 15 per stack of buff poison on the enemy. And that is why you really want to build up this servant and develop a lot of those poison stacks on the enemy, because her damage can either be kind of okay, as I'm probably showing the damage chart right now, where you look at her and you're like, oh, she's far outclassed by people like Kama, Melt, MHX Alter, Skahawk, new Dantes. But then as soon as you start getting some of those poison stacks, I mean, even if you got 5 of them going, like I was talking about earlier, where if you have the first skill and then you have 2 quick cards going before the NP, and those quick cards happen to have the command codes that give you poison, that's an easy 5 stacks right there. And then she's right under Melt. The problem is, if you want to kind of get to where Melt's damage is at, you need to develop 7 poison stacks, which is going to take you 2 full turns to do, whereas someone like Melt or Kama is immediately good. But hey, still being able to beat out people like MHX Alter, that's pretty good, even though stuff like the damage chart doesn't take into account the super effective, ness that Berserkers have, right? They don't give them that extra damage that they really have. They're taken as type neutral, but still rather solid. But does kind of tie into the point that I was making at the beginning of the video, that this is a lot of really cool stuff she's able to do, and effectively she has free damage on anybody. But if you already have Melt, why are you going to use this servant? Because like I said, the damage chart doesn't take super effective into account, and so her base damage is still a little bit lower than Melt's by like 400. Even when you have 7 poison stacks, that's going to take like 2 turns to get going, unless I guess you throw in an additional servant that is also tossing poison buffs out there. I don't know, you could throw Locusta in there if you're having a really fun giggly time. But I think the point still stands that, I mean, she's not doing as much damage as say Melt or Kama, and that is kind of the main thing that single target quick servants are trying to do. They're trying to burst down the enemy, because if they don't beat the enemy before their buffs wear off, they don't really do a whole lot, right? That's always kind of the weakness for something like Arts, where should I say that Arts doesn't have, where if Arts you run out of your buffs, at least your Castoria or your Proto Merlin or your Tamamo are still sitting around, they're healing, they're giving you solemn defense, Tamamo is lowering your skill cooldown, whereas in quick teams, if you run out of your buffs, you and your Scotties are not really doing a whole lot, right? They're kind of just sitting around waiting for the buffs to come back, so you want to burst them down as fast as possible. And being in the top 3 sure is good, and she has a really strong kit. It's just super unfortunate, because even then you could look at people like say the new Dantes, where with only 2 burns he's kind of getting close to her damage, even superseding her poison damage where she has 5 when he only has 2. But then he's also just got like that 50% battery, he's got the Pierce invincibility, he's also an Avenger, so he's just easier to use because Biscione over here can get stopped by sabers. Dantes can very rarely get stopped by anybody outside of like a Moon Cancer, who you rarely fight outside of stuff like Ordeal Call 3. So it's just a little unfortunate for her. And then I understand that this is more of a story event, so they don't have the 3rd Ascension there, but I'm not gonna lie, I think if you wanted to sell some people on this servant, you probably should have dropped the 3rd Ascension, because look, speaking for myself, I thought Low High was really good, but I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna summon for this servant. But then I saw the 3rd Ascension and I was like, boy howdy, I gotta get in on this banner. So maybe in like a week or 2 from now, they'll drop the 3rd Ascension, and maybe it'll make her just even more of a banger than she is, because I like the 1st Ascension. I think the 1st Ascension is cute, 2nd Ascension's alright, but you're gonna need something to put her on that Snake Lady level that Ibuki's got going for her. Point being, you can't even really like sell me on the waifu appeal of this servant, because I mean, she's alright, but I'd rather still use like Ascension 3 Kama, or I'd rather bust out my Melt over there, you know what I'm saying? So it's just kind of awkward that she's kind of just not the best on all of the fronts, and I'm sure there is a Dragon enjoyer out there that's like, nah, this actually caters to me specifically, and more power to you. but I absolutely don't think this is a must summon servant. I think she's very strong, but I think she's going to be very similar to people like Pope Joanna over here on the NA side of things this year, or someone like Takasugi or Wanjina. These very strong servants that are able to release, but nobody really summons for because there's probably something better coming out. One thing that I do want to go ahead and showcase is her Bond CE, because of the Grand Servant update that we're getting later on this year. Bond CEs are actually going to be relevant because you can use a normal CE and a Bond CE, and her Bond actually isn't all that bad. It does give you 30% NP damage permanently, and then whenever you do a critical attack, you are able to apply poison to an enemy, so potentially able to apply the poisons even faster, and especially again, her quick cards already give you 1 poison. You put a command code on those, that's another poison, and if you crit, keep in mind that if you lead a Brave Chain with a quick card, you automatically get a bonus 20% crit chance, so potentially like 3 poison stacks at once. That's not too bad. That can let you build up 7 in 1 turn with the Bond CE. If you do double quick card plus skill 1 before firing an NP, you can build up to 7. That is kind of nice, I would think. I think that's kind of fine. But again, nothing too top tier insane, nothing too broken. Again, some of the struggles that I could see this servant having is just going into a boss fight where they have any defensive abilities. If they pop an invincibility, she has no way to get around it. They pop a dodge, no way to get around it. If they pop defense, nothing to do. She doesn't really have ways to get around these, and if a boss is debuff immune, she's kind of up a creek. So I think it's really unfortunate for her. I think she's really, really strong, but I do want to put into perspective that we just got better single target quick servants, and this is really not enough to allow her to compete with some of the other servants that we have. Especially, I have no idea what they were thinking, giving Kama this insane buff over here as a single target quick servant, pretty much making her the best single target assassin in the game, arguably making some of the other ones borderline irrelevant, except for maybe Gramps. I think Gramps is still kind of holding his own out there. Discussion for a different day, but then he dropped this servant, and it's just a little disappointing because she's definitely good, but you just gave us a legacy buff for a very popular servant that people are probably going to summon for. I think her banner is still out on JP as this banner is going live, so it's just like, I don't know, man. I'm probably just gonna go spend my Saint Quartz on Kama, who has the bigger battery. It functionally does the same thing in applying a debuff to the enemy to do big damage. But if they whiff on that, she just has a stronger kit with also a power mod into, or I don't want to say power mod, but super effective into alter egos, an infinite guts basically, a big attack buff, and the ability to overclock not only her own NP, but anybody's NP that she's going to be fighting alongside. So she's also just got that utility as well. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I think this is like probably like an A tier servant. Very, very strong, very solid, but nothing too special. With me being done yapping, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day, and I'll catch you in the next video where we'll talk about Kurohime, and God, I am hoping that she is actually a nut-bustingly good servant. Or maybe I hope that she's not good so I don't have to summon on that banner.